If you were to look underneath a high schooler's bed, you would find three things. Number one, a crusty sock, and we know why. Number two, a bowl of mac and cheese that has turned into somewhat of a science project, if you will, that they just won't take back to the kitchen. But number three, they'd find a magazine still open, not related to the other two items. That magazine would be a Super Street magazine, and I could put everything that I own, which is not a lot, on the line to say that that magazine is flipped open to a very specific car. And that, my friends, is the Nissan Silvia S15. This car had a stranglehold on everyone and anyone that loved tuner cars. If the R34 GTR is what many would consider to be the hype car, then the S15 Silvia is the Red Lobster biscuits of the car scene. Way, way too good for its own good. And I figured, why not today talk 20 minutes about this car? Completely useless information that you may or may not know, but I will say I'll challenge you a little bit because some of the stuff you may not know, which, by the way, if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe. And if you're looking for car parts, mod your car with your friends over at martiniworks.com. It's how we're able to continue making videos like this, and it would mean the absolute world. Now, I am realizing that these videos are getting in front of some absolute pros, so I'm going to be as careful as I can as I start to explain this, because quite honestly, y'all are experts too. And if you know something about the S15 that I did not discuss, drop it below so we can form a little community of fun little S15 information that nobody knows about. Now, what makes it a Silvia versus a 240SX? I'm gonna be honest with you, like just starting right off of the gate with this. 240SX owners, S13, S14, S15, Silvia owners, they're a different breed. They're borderline in a different dimension in terms of how much time they'll spend learning about their super special edition Nissan 240SX or 200SX or Silvia or Autech edition or Spec-S, Spec-R. Let me be clear. Anything I'm about to tell you, somebody in the comments is about to tell you everything about that and even more, because the amount of history and the amount of pride people have around the trims and the models of this car is borderline insane. Now, what is the difference very clearly between the Silvia and a 240SX, for instance? Well, the Silvia has been marketed as different names in different global areas. So if you're in Australia, you may have heard it as a 200SX. In the United States, you might have heard it as a 240SX. In Japan, you would hear it as a Silvia. They're not all the same. Changes over time, changes by years. Sometimes there's multiple generations running in the same year, which is what makes this whole thing very, very confusing, especially if you're new to it. Some had the Datsun logo, some didn't. Silvia is the Japanese name and has all the goodies that we wanted here in the United States. Now, we're going to try focusing on the S15 particularly, and in my opinion, the S15 is like Angelina Jolie, like timeless, classy, educated, well-rounded, properly good at a surprisingly large amount of things, and also is incredible as a vehicle. Now, what makes it different? Well, for starters, the Silvia was never sold here in the United States. We got the 240SX. It was the last car that came to us, S14, less than 200 horsepower. We had a motor called the KA24DE. It was a 2.4 liter naturally aspirated engine. It was built in Yokohama. To be clear, the DE was a 4 valves per cylinder and dual overhead cam. Now, something really interesting here, though, is that a lot of people will buy Project KAs because you can turbo a KA if you want to. And a lot of times people do it for drifting. Gels has a KA in his car, but his isn't turboed because he enjoys pain and driving painfully slow cars that are naturally aspirated because he doesn't know what right way is up. That said, not all K24DEs are actually the same. And the biggest difference is there were actually two production, or there's more than two, but there's two very prominent production KA24DEs one which was manufactured in Yokohama, and the other one was actually manufactured in Mexico. But they are different. They're different in the oil pickup, the whole oil kind of assembly, the piston oil squirters. Those are different. So if you're actually looking to pick up a KA engine as a project car, you're going to want to know where it's from. It will make a difference. With the Silvia, though, as we start kind of getting into that name, we got an SR20 DET. Turbo, 4-cylinder, 2-liter, 250 horsepower, and it was perfect. Compared to the previous generation, or even what we got in the United States, it was 100 horsepower more. And this is where it's going to be tricky, because there are a lot of people in our comments that are from all around the world. People who, by choice, live in a country where spiders are the size of my hand, which is scary and I hate it. Which means some of this information might be what one might argue as niche. I try my best here, okay? Especially those with the 200SXs out there, I'm trying to include you. I'm doing my best, all right? Now, the Silvia got a ball bearing turbocharger, upgraded ECU is really what made it shine. But really, this car was the perfect balance of everything. Really what Nissan did with the S15 was an affordable, fun, analog driving experience kind of car that really built off of the success of the S13 and the S14. The S13 brought this like rawness, and the S14 started to bring a lot of the refinement, especially in the chassis, and the S15 kind of brought it all together, especially with the motor. You did get, with the S15, a Spec-S or a Spec-R. The Spec-S was an SR20DE, and with that, you got a 5-speed manual. You could also get an automatic, an open diff or an LSD, but you typically got, and the difference between this and the Spec-R is you got a smaller brake booster, you got some smaller brakes, rotors, things like that. There were some changes that made it a little bit more affordable for the enthusiast. With the Spec-R, you got everything that you would want out of a 2-door affordable rear-wheel drive, front-engined, front mid-engined. We'll talk about that. Don't shoot me. The Spec-R was everything. You got a 6-speed, you got the turbo, you got more chassis and suspension upgrades, you got new anti-roll bars, you got better strut bracing, you got a helical limited slip differential. Both options came with Aero for bigger wings and skirts and things like that, but the Spec-R was really mama's juice. That was the one that you wanted to put your lips to and just kind of suck on for weird. That was the one that you really liked. Again, 25 years has passed. A lot of folks get the Spec-S and they put Spec-R parts on it. It's super common, especially turbo swaps, especially transmission swaps, a lot of times differential swaps, because the Spec-R is really expensive. And in the United States, it's even more expensive. I'm not entirely sure how or where or when, but the fact that all of these things on the internet say call for price tells me that it is out of my price range. Every once in a while, you're gonna come across a brand with Nissan, and you might be asking yourself, who is Autech? AUTECH. And this is actually a fun one for me because I saw one of these cars when I was over there last time and I had no idea what the hell was going on, because it was an S15, but it was like a convertible. But it wasn't a convertible. It had a retractable hardtop. That is Autech. Back in the 80s, 70s, 90s, and even barely into the early 2000s, Nissan loved doing stuff with different partners, different companies, different tuning arms, things like that. And Autech was a car developer and official partner of Nissan. They acted as their tuning division to offer updated tunes for both the engine, interior styling, things like that. And Autech Edition S15s are pretty rare. They can go for a pretty penny because they didn't just touch Spec-Rs, they touched Spec-Ss too, which these are really cool. I'm gonna give you an example because I actually found a brochure of it. On a naturally aspirated side, they offered this for the DE, which brought compression from 10 to 11.7 to 1. You got a new exhaust system, new camshaft profiles with tuning, revised intake valves, and tuning for 2.2 million yen, which as of right now is about $15,000 according to my terribly translated app when I took a picture of the brochure. That's a lot of money, but the car is sick. It's super cool, but you might find those, actually. They're kind of hiding around. One thing I will say, don't get too caught up in the trims and the special editions and things like that with Nissan. Nissan did that with a lot of companies, and you can go down a rabbit hole very, very fast. We did that when we were looking at our Altea kit, Autech, some of these other brands, they all do it. Some of them are way cooler than others, but don't believe just because something is a special edition that makes your S15 super rare, super expensive. S15s are vastly overpriced in the United States, and I don't care which way you swing it. If you're looking to buy one, you need to be super smart about it, because for the amount of car that you get at $40,000, $45,000, S15 is a big pill to swallow. It's also fucking expensive, dude. All right, weird facts you may not know. The S15 is actually 35 millimeters narrower and shorter in height and shorter in length than the S14. And that was because Nissan needed to make it more accommodating for Japan taxes on how vehicle sizes work, especially for their classifications. So when they made the S15, they actually made it snubbier than the previous generation. This was technically the last Nissan to also use a FR layout for the engine, which is pretty interesting, not that anybody cares. You could get a Hikis in the Spec-S. Hikis was Nissan's system for the rear wheel steering, which is cool, except it's not, because a lot of times people don't want it. They delete it. We deleted it in the R34 because we wanted to drift it. But it actually is pretty neat. You can actually get Hikis in some really rad Nissan platforms. The S15 with the retractable hardtop from Autech was called the Varietta. That was kind of neat. And the Silvia was actually rallied in Group B and won like once. It wasn't very good. Why would you want an S15? I spent a lot of time thinking about this, because when I look back as to why there was such a heyday around the 90s cars, a lot of people think FDRX7, 3000 GT, R33, R32, R34 GTR, Evo, STI, GC8, you know, Type Rs. Like, that's what they think of. I don't think inherently people naturally go to the S15 first. So I was like curious, why? Why would people get that? At a price point that puts you into R34 GTT era, why would you want to jump into that? And I think a lot of it comes down to it's properly good looking. Like, I don't know quite how to explain it, but a clean, modified S15, it's like the physical embodiment of what I think is like the final send-off of 90s tuner cars in Japan. It's perfect. It has everything. It's rear-wheel drive. It's like manual transmission. It's a turbo 4-cylinder. They're fun. They're spritzy. They're fast. They drift well. They're balanced. Initially, the S15s were really affordable, and it was like an S13 chassis in terms of connectability to the road. You know what I mean? Like, it has that connection. It had the suspension upgrades from the S14, but it had the S15 looks, and it had a cool motor, and Nissan knows how to make a damn good-looking car. In the 90s, I don't know what they were on, but gosh darn it, could have kissed the men and women weird that designed those cars, because they are perfect. They look properly good. And you'd say the same thing, Mr. Krusty Sock. You also got a bigger turbocharger. You got an improved compressor wheel. You got a redesigned turbo manifold and high-capacity fuel injectors. You got the 480cc's compared to the 370cc's in the S14. If you're looking at SR20 DETs, the VCT system was improved. This car was fantastic for drifting. I hate to keep saying that, but it also has a massive modification culture. The car was practically built to be modified, and they look good. So many companies supported this car. So many companies drifted and raced these cars. So many of these cars went out and did stuff. And that's what's so cool about this car, is that it wasn't like the coolest thing about Nissans, and I've always tried to figure out why I have such a problem with why Nissan is the way that it is because they had such a perfect recipe for what it meant to create a fun, good car that you could drive and love and enjoy and could still do all the other stuff that you were responsible to do in a car. It wasn't trying to make Halo R8s every single day. It made cars for you and me. And that, my friends, is why I think the S15 is like the perfect car. It is such a good looking car. Why wouldn't you buy one? Because sometimes they're beat to absolute hell. Here's a couple things to look out for if you're looking for one. VCT solenoid or the gear, it's Nissan's VTEC. They love to rattle and they fail. As age carries on, faulty AC compressor, those things tend to fail. A lot of times you'll deal with leaky manifold, turbo gaskets, those are pretty common. A lot of these have stressed out suspension systems. If they have modifications on them from Japan, they're gonna be tired. They're tired. These cars are tired, just like I'm tired of you not being subscribed. and not modifying your car at martiniworks.com. Do that, please, so we can continue to make these and I can spend more time doing more research on cars because I love this. The other thing I'll say with this is something to look out for. Everything on these cars from an Aero side of things, very expensive. And they are just like expensive right now. Unless you can find one in Japan from a friend, you got to be really careful because you are investing a good chunk of change. I always put everything next to a Viper, and you can get a lot of car in a second gen Viper. That's right about the same price as an S15. How do you modify it? A lot of people will say undercoat it immediately. These are Nissans, they rust. They're always gonna rust. Check a look at the strut towers is a really good spot. If it's got a wide body kit, check the welds, check the cuts, all that sort of good stuff. You're spending 40 grand on a car, be nitpicky. It doesn't matter if the car was thrashed. You can still be nitpicky if you're spending $40,000 on a Nissan. A lot of people say then go with suspension, and I would agree. Because these cars are old and tired, sometimes shaking it up with a good suspension is proper. You know, a lot of people do like the HKS Hypermax coilovers if they want to stay authentic. You can jump into some Fortunatos if you want. Otherwise, there's a bunch of great suppliers on Martini Works that you can get it from. Some tension rods, inner tie rods, outer tie rods. If you end up drifting, you might want to do a drop knuckle to do something really nice and easy. But if you're just doing a show build, you don't have to go crazy if you don't want to. Vertex body kit, Origin Lab body kit, these are all fantastic things. The Ganador side mirrors are going to cost an absolute fortune. You can get reps. I don't think anybody's going to care too much unless you care a lot, in which case I'm sorry. Blitzer Greddy front mount intercooler, HKS super power flow filter, even though it's technically not a good air intake filter because the bits break apart and they go into your engine bay. I don't know why everybody puts this on their car. We have one on the R34. I don't even know how it happened. It's like a fungus in your shower that just you wake up one day and it's there and you don't know what to do with it. But with wheels, I would say stick with something from Japan. Keep that style really nice. I've seen work ZR10s, I've seen Blitz 03s, Blitz 01s, I've seen upsized BBSs before even, which I think looks kind of cool. But 18 by 9.5 plus 25 seems to be a really proper setup on 235/35 for a nice little stretched look. Michelin Pilot Sport 4Ss, Continental ECS02s or DWS06s, but invest in some good tires because this is a great car that if you go cheap on the tires, it's just gonna feel like garbage. It's a lot of information. The S15 is one of those cars where the history and the trims supersede almost, I would almost argue some of the heritage within the R32, R33, and R34 era. And the reason that I say that is because everybody saw the success of the GTR, right? In the 90s, it was one of the most successful racing cars of all time. It took on everything from Le Mans to rally, from rally to endurance racing to JGTC to everything in between. But it was an expensive car. The GTR was properly priced, which meant that people wanted to have something like the GTR, but they couldn't afford what the GTR was. And Nissan knew that. And ever since the 70s and 80s, Nissan always did a really great job at coming out with cars that were more affordable, that were still fun to drive, and that Nissan still respected the consumer with, even though they couldn't afford the GTR. And I think the S15 is the last real proper send-off that Nissan did that met that Japanese culture in the perfect way. You got a deliciously good car that we would probably attribute to like a 350Z, but we don't want to admit that. But the 350Z is also a perfect car. So I might be glazing it a little bit, but I think they're absolutely gorgeous. They're great cars. You guys will have to let me know what you think about this episode and what's one thing that you may not have learned or you may not have known before watching this video. And of course, if I'm wrong, I'm sure I'll get killed in the comments, but I do think this is a pretty good video, and I hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm Alex, Alex_Martini2_ on Instagram, and we'll see you later.